Ever feel like life in America is like flipping through channels on your TV? You know, one minute you're watching a quiet nature documentary, and the next you're like right in the middle of a chaotic reality show. That's America for you, right? Just this crazy mix of experiences all happening at the same time. And today we're going to dive into some real stories about what it's like to live in this whirlwind. We've got interviews with people from all over the U.S., each with their own unique take on life, liberty, and, the pursuit of happiness and all that. Like one guy took his fascination with interstates to a whole new level. He was like captivated by the numbering system, odd numbers going north to south, even numbers going east to west. So he decides to do a cross-country road trip where he matches his speed to the interstate number. 70 miles an hour on I-70 or on I-80. On the surface, it just sounds like a funny quirk, right?
Yeah.
But it got me thinking about this uniquely American drive to push boundaries, to kind of test the limits. Like, even in something as, I don't know, mundane as driving, there's this sense of adventure, There's a need to make it a little more exciting. And speaking of adventure, we also talked to this woman from Guyana who shared her experience moving to the States. She was just blown away by the fall colors, something she had never experienced before. Now I can relate to that feeling of awe, Like, I remember the first time I saw the Grand Canyon, I just stood there speechless, feeling so small against this vast landscape. Anyway, this woman, she also talked about the difference in traffic between Guyana and the U.S. Here, it's mostly cars, maybe the occasional aggressive cyclist. But in Guyana, you got cars. You got pedestrians, cyclists, and get this, donkey carts. Donkey carts. Can you imagine trying to merge onto a freeway with a donkey cart in the next lane? Talk about culture shock. But America isn't all bustling cities and crazy traffic, right? We also heard from a woman who grew up as the only Taiwanese family on an island in Maine. Now, that's a story. She described this fascinating balance between small-town life, like no traffic lights, everyone knows everyone, and then suddenly, bam, it's summer, and the island is just overrun with tourists. It made me think about how diverse America really is, and not just in terms of people, but also in terms of lifestyles. You can have these pockets of tranquility, these almost like hidden worlds existing just miles away from all the hustle and bustle. And that diversity of experience, that's something that came up again and again in these interviews. We have a deaf woman who talked about how different the West Coast felt compared to the East Coast. We have a Canadian musician who was surprised by the American obsession with defining people by their jobs. It's like everyone here is trying to fit their life into this neat little box. It's all, what do you do? Almost like who you are as a person is secondary to what you produce, what you contribute to the economy. It's a fascinating perspective, especially coming from someone outside of the American bubble. And then we have this man from New Zealand reflecting on how his grandfather's experience in World War I shaped their family history. Makes you think about how deeply connected we are to the past, how events that happened generations ago can still like ripple through our lives today.
It's like we're all carrying these invisible threads woven through time, connecting us to people and places we may never even know. Speaking of connections, family's a big one, right? We heard from a guy who actually built a log house with his wife. Can you imagine? The teamwork, the dedication. And then on a totally different note, we have a woman who talked about growing up with a single mom who worked full time and made her realize how much she wanted to prioritize family time, when she became a mother herself. I think a lot of us grapple with that balance, trying to find that sweet spot between work, family, and just having a life, Speaking of life, let's talk about food. What's a deep dive into American culture without at least a mention of food, right? We have this woman who takes cooking vacations all around the world. Talk about a dream job. She shared this amazing story about a simple Italian pasta dish with tuna, garlic, chili flakes, and arugula. It was the simplicity of it, the fresh ingredients that made it so elegant and delicious. Now, on the flip side, we also have this guy who admitted to craving Fuddrucker burgers and fries every now and then.
Hey, I get it. Sometimes you just need that greasy goodness. But he also talked about his love for Indian food. Tandoori chicken, chicken masala, all that good stuff. And it's like that's America in a nutshell, right? This melting pot of cultures and cuisines where you can have a burger one day and chicken tikka masala the next. Of course, it's not all about eating. We also heard from this couple who are huge baseball fans. They even call each other at night to talk about, get this, minor league games. Now that's dedication. And then there's this guy who prefers listening to baseball on the radio rather than watching on TV. He said it allows him to use his imagination more. It's like he's creating his own personal movie in his head, which I guess is kind of what we're all doing, right? Building our own narratives, our own versions of the American dream. And speaking of dreams, we also heard from this guy who is actually training to try out for a minor league baseball team. Talk about going after what you want. It's inspiring to see that kind of passion, that willingness to put yourself out there, even if the odds are stacked against you.
It's like that's the spirit of America, this belief that anything is possible if you're willing to work hard and chase your dreams. But life in America isn't all home runs and grand slams. We also heard from a guy who's passionate about UFC, basketball, football, but he also appreciates soccer for its global appeal. It's like sports could be this universal language, this way to connect with people from all walks of life, regardless of language or cultural barriers. And then we have this woman who talked about her childhood love for ice skating. She even played hockey for a few years, but back then the girls' teams used a stick with a ring instead of a regular hockey stick. Talk about blast from the past. But you know what really blew me away? We talked to this guy, and he's a licensed pilot. He talked about his passion for flying, how he got his license, and how he's planning to spend more time in the air now that he has, more free time. I mean, who hasn't dreamed of soaring above the clouds, right? It's like this ultimate symbol of freedom, of like escaping the everyday and reaching for something bigger, something more. And, that sense of freedom, that yearning for something more, it runs deep in the American psyche, doesn't it? It's what drives us to explore, to create, to push boundaries, to constantly redefine what it means to live the American dream. It's a messy, complicated, sometimes contradictory dream, but it's ours. And I think that's what these stories ultimately reveal. The messy, beautiful, complicated reality of life in America. We're a nation of contradictions, of dreamers and doers, of strivers and seekers. And it's in those contradictions, in that beautiful mess, that the real story of America unfolds. Something that really stuck with me from these conversations was how much work comes up. It's like this constant thing in American life, this thing that defines who we are and how we see ourselves. Like we talked to this working mom, and she was, talking about the challenge of balancing a career and family, especially in a society that, let's face it, puts a ton of pressure on women to do it all. You're supposed to be super mom and career woman and loving wife and, looking effortlessly put together all at the same time. It's exhausting. And it's not just moms who feel this pressure. We also talked to this musician, and he was surprised by how obsessed Americans are with defining people by their jobs. It's all, what do you do? Like, it made him realize how much our identity gets tied up in our work. Yeah. How it becomes this all-encompassing thing that defines our worth, And then there's this whole question of work-life balance, which, let's be honest, can feel like a total myth sometimes. We talked to this woman, and she admitted to, like, swinging back and forth between pouring everything into her job and then swinging back to prioritize family time. And she even said she doesn't always get it right, which I think a lot of us can relate to, right? It's like this constant struggle, this tightrope walk, trying to find that sweet spot where you feel fulfilled in both your work and your personal life. But, sometimes it's good to step back from the grind and think about the things that bring us joy, right? The things that make life, worth living, like language. It's fascinating how language shapes how we see the world, how it can even become a marker of our identity, Like we talked to this woman who grew up bilingual, wanting to sound American when she spoke English, and like a Taiwanese person was speaking Taiwanese. It's like she was code switching, adapting her language to fit in different social contexts. It made me think about how we're all constantly adapting, consciously or unconsciously, to navigate these complexities of our social world. And speaking of adapting, we also talked to this guy who calls himself a linguistic chameleon. He lived in so many different regions growing up that he naturally adapts his accent to match the person he's talking to. Yeah. It's like he's subconsciously trying to create a connection to build rapport through language. But, even with the best intentions, sometimes miscommunication happens, especially when you throw regional accents into the mix. Like we talked to this guy in Baltimore. He was surprised when someone couldn't understand his pronunciation of Baltimore. Apparently, to this person, it sounded like Balmore or Baldmore, which I got it kind of made me chuckle. It's those little quirks, those regional variations that make language so interesting, so full of surprises. And sometimes those surprises can lead to some pretty hilarious misunderstandings. We heard from this guy who was working with an American boss who kept saying, "What about it?" Now, in some cultures, that phrase can come across as super rude, but in this context, the boss simply meant, "Tell me quickly what happened." It's a good reminder that communication isn't just about words. It's also about understanding the nuances of cultural context. Speaking of context, education is a big one, right? It shapes so much of our worldview, our opportunities, our understanding of the world. We talked to this guy who grew up in Philadelphia, and he described his educational journey. taking city buses to school in 3rd grade, attending magnet schools, even going to Temple University instead of 12th grade. It's like his education was this winding path full of twists and turns, but it ultimately led him to where he is today. And then we have this woman who talked about being recruited to run track for the Brown University track team. She was a self-proclaimed farm girl from a small town, so the Ivy League world was like a total culture shock. It's amazing how education can open doors to worlds we might never have imagined, introduce us to people and perspectives that challenge our assumptions and broaden our horizons. But education isn't just about formal degrees and fancy institutions. It's also about that lifelong pursuit of knowledge, that willingness to stay curious, to keep learning and growing, no matter how old you are. We talked to this guy who talked about the importance of continuing education, even for people who are already, established in their careers. It's about staying relevant, staying adaptable in a world that's constantly changing, evolving, throwing, new challenges our way. And speaking of challenges, let's talk about relationships. Because let's be real, they can be both the most rewarding and the most challenging part of life.
Right.
We heard from this guy who talked about the complexities of growing up with a mother from a different culture. There were, cultural clashes, misunderstandings, but ultimately he realized they shared many of the same values and approaches to life. It's like, even with those differences, there was this underlying connection, this bond that transcended cultural barriers. And then there's this woman who talked about the evolving dynamics of her relationship with her daughter. As her daughter gets older, she's having to adjust her parenting style to recognize that her daughter is becoming her own independent person with her own thoughts and feelings and dreams. It's that beautiful, bittersweet process of letting go, of watching our children spread their wings and fly, even if it means they're flying away from us. Speaking of flying, we heard from this couple who loves to travel in their RV, avoiding big cities and opting for the quiet beauty of the countryside, those hidden gems off the beaten path. It's like they found their own version of freedom, their own way of escaping the everyday, connecting with nature, with each other, with the simple joys of life on the road.
And then there's this guy who talked about his passion for mountain climbing. He was inspired by Mount Hood in Oregon and has even climbed it a few times. Talk about conquering your fears and pushing your limits. It's like he's drawn to that challenge, that sense of accomplishment that comes from reaching the summit, from overcoming obstacles and proving to himself that he can do anything he sets his mind to. But travel doesn't always have to involve, epic adventures and death-defying feats. We also talked to this woman who loves exploring her own city, Washington, D.C. She talked about finding hidden gems, experiencing her city like a tourist, always discovering something new, even in a place she's lived for years. It's like she's reminding us that adventure can be found anywhere, even in our own backyards if we're open to it, if we're willing to look beyond the familiar and embrace the unknown. And, that sense of exploration, that willingness to embrace the unknown. It's something I think we could all benefit from.
Right.
Yeah. It's what keeps us curious, what keeps us engaged with the world, what keeps us from falling into that rut of routine and complacency. It's about approaching life with a sense of wonder, with a childlike curiosity, always asking questions, always seeking new experiences, always pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zones. Because ultimately, isn't that what life is all about? Learning, growing, evolving, discovering who we are and what we're capable of. And in a country as vast and diverse as America, those possibilities are endless. Those opportunities for exploration are boundless. So as we continue our deep dive into the American experience, I want to challenge you to think about your own story, your own unique perspective on what it means to live in this crazy, beautiful, ever-evolving nation. Because your story matters. Your voice matters. And it's by sharing our stories, by listening to each other's experiences, that we can start to build bridges of understanding, to celebrate our differences, and to find that common ground that connects us all as human beings. As we wrapped up our deep dive into the American experience, I keep coming back to this one question. What does it mean to call America home? Is it a place or a feeling, an ideal? We've heard so many different perspectives on this, so many interpretations of what home really means. We talked to this guy who built a log cabin with his wife, brick by brick, log by log. And it's like that cabin it's more than just a house, right? It's a symbol of their love, their hard work, their commitment to building a life together. It's their own little piece of the American dream, carved out of the wilderness with her own two hands. Then there's this woman who described her row house with its bay window and cozy living room. And she talked about feeling this sense of history, like the walls were whispering stories of the families who had lived there before, It's like home is about more than just physical space. It's about the memories we create, the connections we forge, the sense of belonging we find in a particular place. But home isn't always stationary, is it? We also heard from this couple that travels the country in their RV, their home on wheels. And for them, home is about freedom. It's about the open road.
It's about experiencing new things and collecting memories along the way. It's like they're carrying their home with them wherever they go, always searching for new adventures, new horizons. And then there's this guy who grew up as a Navy brat, constantly moving from place to place, never really putting down roots anywhere. And you might think that would make it hard to feel at home anywhere. But he talked about finding a sense of belonging in the people he met, the experiences he shared, the memories he carried with him. Like, home is less about a specific location and more about a feeling of connection, a sense of being grounded in something larger than yourself, whether that's family, friends, or even just a shared human experience. And, that sense of connection can come from all sorts of places. We heard from this woman who talked about finding a sense of home in her Taiwanese heritage. Even though she grew up on an island in Maine, it's like she carries her culture with her family history, her traditions, and those things become a part of her identity, a part of what makes her feel, grounded and connected to something bigger than herself.
And then there's this man who was born and raised in India, but talked about finding a sense of home in the United States. He talked about the opportunities he's been given, the freedom to pursue his dreams, the feeling of being welcomed and accepted. It's like home is about finding a place where you can be yourself, where you can grow and thrive and contribute to something larger than yourself. And as I listen to all these different stories, all these different interpretations of what home means, I realize that maybe there isn't one single answer. Maybe home is a tapestry woven from all these different threads: place, family, culture, experience, opportunity. And it's the unique combination of these threads that creates the rich and varied fabric of American life. So as we kind of wrap up this episode, as you go about your day, I encourage you to reflect on your own definition of home. What are the threads that weave together your sense of belonging? Where do you find comfort, connection, inspiration? And how do you contribute to the ongoing story of America, the ever-evolving tapestry of this nation we call home? Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep diving deep, and most importantly, keep sharing your story. Because it's in those stories, in those individual threads, that we find the true meaning of home, the true spirit of America.